Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is an original Xbox One console from 2013. I bought it for £70 from CEX with a 5-year warranty. Peace of mind is always a welcome bonus with older hardware like this. It was listed as discounted, which is their lowest grade, so it could have been pretty beaten up and shipped with a third-party controller. It actually arrived in pretty good condition with an official white controller which looks great. With the seemingly ever-increasing price of the PS5, Xbox Series X/S, as well as PC components, I think more casual gamers will be turning their attention to older 8th gen consoles and their near infinite number of cheap, second-hand and physical games. Now I'll be completely honest, I'm a PlayStation man myself. Ever since my dad brought home a PS1 in the late 90s, there's always been a Sony console under my roof. That said, I still have an appreciation for Xbox. I bought a One X when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out because I wanted to make the most out of my family's first ever 4K TV, and Red Dead ran natively at 2160p. Fast forward nearly 8 years and I think Red Dead 2 is still one of the best looking games out there, even on this base console. On 2013's Xbox One with its 1.75GHz 8-core Jaguar processor, 8GB of DDR3 RAM and 853MHz GPU, Red Dead Redemption 2 runs at a resolution of 1536 by 864. It targets 30 frames per second like every other console and will maintain that a lot of the time, though it will drop a few frames in Saint Denis. The image looks a little soft, especially if you have other versions to compare it to, but at 32 years of age everything is starting to look a bit blurry to me, so what's the difference? It's a commendable effort. Another Rockstar classic, GTA 5, will also play well, though I can only speak for the single player experience. I've got to be honest, I actually prefer the more vibrant presentation of the original 7th gen release, but the enhanced 1080p resolution and more consistent 30fps is a welcome improvement here. This came out pretty early in the Xbox One's life cycle, so it's not surprising that it still holds up. Next up we're off to Miami, well actually the entire, albeit shrunken down, mainland United States. This is The Crew 2. I put hours upon hours into this back in 2018. I couldn't tell you what the story is about if I'm being honest, but I love travelling across America, visiting different cities and landmarks in various vehicles, even if I'm seeing it all at 900p resolution with adaptive sync and 30fps, with a couple of drops here and there. Still, at £4 on the second-hand market, it's a very cheap way to see the States. As an 8th generation console, 30fps is the most common performance target, and most titles you pick up will probably come quite close. Another absolute classic and good example of this is the incredible Witcher 3. It's been over 10 years since this launched and I still dedicate a couple of hours every month to sit down and play this classic. But let's talk about some exceptions to the 30fps rule. 2016's Doom comes to mind. This targets 60 frames per second, though it's not perfect, and it uses a dynamic 1080p to get there. Interestingly, the latest Call of Duty, Black Ops 7, is available on Xbox One and PS4, for now anyway. Apparently support ends after Season 6, and I'm assuming that will coincide with the release of this year's 9th gen only COD game. I'm also assuming that Black Ops 7 suffers from some pretty noticeable visual downgrades compared to the newer versions. To be honest, I had no idea that this came to Xbox One and PS4, but after playing a couple of games, I still had fun. It's definitely struggling a bit, but it's giving us more than 30fps here, somewhere between 30 and 45 most likely, but the more that happens on screen, the more things slow down of course. This inconsistency with the fluidity makes using the controller a bit more challenging too, but as I said, it's still pretty fun. I think Fortnite is definitely a better way to get your multiplayer shooter fix on the Xbox One though. This runs with up to 60fps, so if you're looking to enjoy this for yourself or maybe your kids want to play, then an older, cheaper second-hand console could be all you need. Now I covered Black Ops 7 just now, a later 8th gen release, and I want to expand on this a bit more. Now at this point in time we're seeing fewer games come to this console, as well as the PS4, which is expected, right? But it's interesting to note how well some of the latest cross-gen games work. One of my personal favourites is Atomfall, an action survival game set in 1960s England. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this one, to be honest. The game is pretty blurry, visually, with a lot of jagged edges, which to be honest, are present on newer consoles too, though in terms of performance, it feels fairly smooth considering the hardware at hand. However, I would say that you should expect fairly long load times, especially when transitioning between the different areas. Assassin's Creed Mirage also does a good job of staying fairly smooth, and it looks really good. This is the last mainline game in the series to launch for 8th generation consoles, and it's a more linear and stealth focused experience like the older games. I really enjoyed this when I played through it originally, and I still think it's very well worth a play in 2026. Plus it feels pretty smooth overall as well. Alright, so I need to mention Cyberpunk 2077. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like a sub £100 console is going to run cross-gen games flawlessly, because while there are some solid examples out there, there are also other not so solid ones. What I will say, however, is that Cyberpunk definitely feels better to play on older consoles these days. I did play the last gen version briefly a couple of weeks after launch, and it was truly awful. That's really my only point of comparison, but it feels a lot more stable now. Of course, we don't get the major overhaul patches, and Night City feels a bit dead. I also think there's some serious CPU bottlenecking going on here. Now we're getting pop-in, weapon firing delay, and a lot of lag. There are some weird visual glitches occurring here. An SSD upgrade could potentially help that, well, more so with the loading times, but performance problems I think go beyond the HDD. Still, it may be worth trying the game for yourself, especially as it's on Game Pass at the time of upload. In fact, almost every game I've tested today is. Now, a monthly subscription certainly takes away from the cost-saving aspect of an older console and dirt cheap physical games, but there are a few benefits in my opinion, more so with the OG Xbox One. The first is the extensive and ever-changing library of games, new and old. So I prefer physical media, like a lot of you I'm sure, and I've got a lot of Xbox 360 games on disc. All of the ones I own will work here. Just put the disc in the drive, like GTA 4 for example, download an update, and before you know it, you're enjoying the game, just like you would have been doing back in the 360 days. Now that said, I do appreciate the convenience of a digital marketplace and the opportunity to try games that I may not otherwise pick off the shelf. For me, Game Pass is a great way to play through some of my favourites from back in the 360 days, and even on an OG Xbox One, you might find that certain older titles run more consistently as well. Now for some reason, the Xbox One will show us games that we can't always install. This is usually newer gen games that don't support the older consoles. In fact, the whole Xbox interface looks cluttered and feels a bit sluggish here. I wasn't going to mention it, I think the layout especially is just a personal preference thing, but it sort of ties in with my next point. A slow UI and constant reminders of games we can't play just reiterates the age of this machine, but this brings me on to cloud gaming. Now if your internet is up to it and you don't mind a bit of latency, cloud gaming can be a good way of trying out some of the newer titles out there without purchasing a brand new console. Cloud gaming is basically Netflix but for games. You're streaming them on the cloud somewhere without downloading anything. I tried Indiana Jones and Forza Horizon 6 like this. Both of them ran well, though Indiana Jones offered a sharper visual presentation. I'd probably avoid first-person multiplayer games because of the increased latency, not that I'm any good at them with minimal latency. Cloud gaming is available with the cheapest Essential Game Pass tier for now, and you can stream Game Pass games or compatible games that you own. Again, all of this may be subject to change because it seems like there's something always happening at Xbox or changing. But overall, I think the OG Xbox One is a great low-cost proposition in 2026, though I'd certainly think about the newer One S instead if the price is similar. The redesigned machine is smaller, lighter, and features an internal PSU rather than an external brick. It also has a slight GPU speed increase, supports 4K output as well as HDR. Those with even more to spend who want the absolute best 8th gen Xbox experience should also consider the One X, which brings resolution and performance enhancements to a wide range of games, new and old. Furthermore, be sure to see how the PlayStation 4 compares price-wise where you live. While the Xbox One is the cheapest 8th gen option these days, at least here in the UK, and from most of the listings I've seen, the PlayStation 4 is probably the most popular, and we'll be covering that very soon because I'll admit that is probably one of, if not my favourite console to date. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.